Bam, ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, 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 ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, bam. Do da dee dee da 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 dee da dee dee. Welcome to Rainbows Are Circles, a podcast exploring human potential and everyday wonder. What possibilities open up for us when we explore life with optimism, curiosity, and an open mind? Join me, Julie Malari, as we wake up to wonder and speak with inspirational guests on the topics of personal development, alternative health, and even magical, mystical, yet often misunderstood practices. Are you ready? Do 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 do. Ba be dee bee ba dee bee. Wow 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 wow. Have you ever taken the time to reflect on the quality of your conversations? Are they full of surface-level small talk and gossip? Or do you often have valuable conversations that uplift and nourish you? In this episode, we speak with Jan Keck about how meaningful conversations lead to more fulfilling relationships. Jan is the creator of the Ask Deep Questions cards, a simple yet powerful deck with 48 questions that invite people to have more meaningful and vulnerable conversations. His mission? To help people feel less alone through the art of conversation and human connection. In this episode, Jan reveals that the key to connection lies in the quality of the questions we ask people. We will explore helpful tools for creating connections with new people, why trust and intimacy need to be built slowly, and why too much too soon often turns people away. Why you should maximize time with people that add value to your life, and reevaluate the time you spend or the way you interact with people that seem to bring you down. Why vulnerability is key for meaningful conversations, and how to be an active listener and give the gift of presence. Explore all this and more as we wake up to wonder with Jan Keck. Good morning, Jan. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to start just by hearing a little bit about yourself, your background, and what inspired you to create Ask Deep Questions.
People will probably notice when I speak a little bit more. English is not my first language. I actually grew up in Germany, and I've been living in Canada now for 11 years. And there's something that happened when I moved here that, looking back, was the inspiration for Ask Deep Questions and all the things that I'm creating now. And it was that I came here, I didn't know a single person. That's a lie. I knew one single person, which was an acquaintance that did an exchange with my university in Germany. And she let me crash on her couch for the first few nights that I arrived here. But other than that, I knew no one. And I had to almost build my whole social network from scratch. Yet I didn't even know that I was going to stay in Canada long term. So the first few years, it was just like, yeah, I'm meeting people, but I wasn't really invested in the relationships because I'm probably only going to be here for a year and then moving back to Germany. But as the universe makes its own plans, I fell in love. I tried to stay longer. I extended my visit. I went back and forth, and now I've been in Canada for 11 years. And it wasn't until maybe 3-4 years ago where I attended this weekend retreat, and all it said was, let's go outside of the city, work on our personal goals for the year, and connect with other like-minded people. And I was sold. Again, I didn't know anyone except my business partner at that time, that we attended this together. And at the end of those 48 hours, I made 30 new friends. And I had an experience where I felt so comfortable being myself around everyone that I literally had just met. And I now say it was this feeling of belonging that I hadn't felt since I arrived in Canada. And in that moment, I decided, okay, I want to recreate more experiences like this. I want to create more moments like this and have more connections that are deep and meaningful, where you really can be yourself without having to fear judgment or being criticized or even changing yourself to fit in. at that time, all I knew is I wanted to feel that feeling more often. I wanted to have more moments where I can be vulnerable with someone, yet I didn't really know how to do it. And I definitely wasn't looking of starting a business or maybe even a movement. I just wanted to create those moments for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I started hosting different get-togethers, dinner parties, and then one camping trip that I took a bunch of people that I knew, but they didn't know each other. So I wanted to find a way for them to connect in the car ride, which is 4 hours to get outside of the city where we even started the camping trip. And because they're strangers to each other, this could either be a super awkward with nobody talking to each other, or it could be this great opportunity for people to get to know each other. So by the time we get into the canoes and we start paddling, they already know each other. So that's what I created the first version of Ask Deep Questions for, which was 50 questions that I found online that I collected from listening to podcasts, from reading books that I always wanted to ask my friends but never really did. Mm-hmm. And I just printed them on a deck of cards, handed a deck of cards to each car and said, here you go, have a conversation, and hopefully you get to know each other by the time we arrive.
And how did that go?
It was the most magical thing, because at the end of that camping trip, I've realized, okay, we've used the cards in the car, but we also used them around the campfire. We used them in the middle of the lake under the stars, sitting in a canoe watching the stars. And it just inspired all these conversations about things that we rarely get a chance to talk about.
Yeah.
And the people that were there, we all connected in a very different way than we would have if we didn't have that tool, or if we just stuck to small talk.
When you did, that first trip that you took out of the city, when you came out with 30 new friends, how did you guys break the ice in that situation?
On that first retreat, we did a whole bunch of different things, and I tried to reverse engineer a lot of things that happened there. There's a few components which now I say are the basis for deep human connection. And one of them is you need to find people that align with your values. Mm-hmm. And because everybody was more or less interested in personal growth, we're working on our personal goals for the year. We aligned a lot on those values in terms of growth mindset. And then we all got quite uncomfortable by, they had us do this team building exercise where we climbed this structure. And it started off as 2 teams of 2 people competing against each other, trying to climb the structure. And the bars were a little bit further apart with the higher you get. And once you got halfway up, you realize, okay, I really need to help my partner to get up so we can win against the other team. And once you got to the top, you realized, oh, we need a third person to even get to the top. So you had to collaborate with your opponents to succeed for at least one person of the 4 people that were climbing to get to the top. Okay. So it was, and this all happened in Canada in January, where it was freezing cold outside with snow and ice everywhere. So we all got really uncomfortable and kind of pushed our limits, had this great experience. So to me, that was the second component of being vulnerable with each other, which doesn't necessarily have to be physically. In that case, it was because we were doing physical activities, but it could also be in conversations of sharing something that you might be judged for.
Right. Okay, so when you went on this camping trip and you printed out your first sort of series of these cards, was anybody resistant to trying it?
So because there were 2 cars and I was in one car, we of course picked up the questions pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. The other car, some of the people were taking a nap for the first part of the trip. And I don't know if they went as deep as we did with the cards, but definitely once we were there, I think everybody was open to it because we all crave connection.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's almost too vulnerable to bring up a question. I've realized that for myself, that there's questions that I would like to ask my friends, yet I don't want to be the one who's asking them. So printing them on a card and letting them pick a card just took away that whole pressure of having to be the one person to bring up a certain topic.
Tell us how the cards work.
So the original deck that is the first one that was based on the one that I used at the camping trip, has 48 questions, and there's 3 different levels. There's curious questions, there's brave questions, and vulnerable questions. And that's kind of the order that I advise people to use them in, of going from curious questions, which are just below the surface, to the brave questions, which invite you to share more personal stories, and then the vulnerable questions, which might be things you've never shared with anyone. And every time I explain this, there's half the people go like, oh, I'm not going too vulnerable. I'm starting slowly. Let's start with curious.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another type of person that goes, oh, I'm not afraid of sharing anything. I'm going to go with vulnerable right away. And what I've learned is that anytime somebody wants to go with a vulnerable question first, and they do, the connection doesn't happen as well as if we all start at the curious level and then work our way down to it at the same speed.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that is? It's just too much too soon?
You've probably, I think everybody has had an experience with somebody who is an oversharer.
Yes.
Shares too much too quickly. Like, you just met them at a party or an event, and already they're telling you about all their health problems. And when somebody overshares, it makes other people uncomfortable. Other times it's you pick up the vulnerable question because you think you're ready, but then you read the question and then you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. Now I'm uncomfortable and I feel like I have to answer a question that I don't want to talk about. So there is this research behind it where they talk about how everybody has a certain level of how open they are to sharing something, and you have to adjust your level to the person that has it the least open, and then you work your way up together. And I came up with this campfire metaphor because I created the cards mostly for this camping trip. And the idea is, if you've ever been camping, and I don't know if you're an outdoor person, if you know how to start a fire, but usually you don't hold the lighter up to a big log.
Yeah.
You start burning maybe some paper or some smaller sticks first, and then you add the bigger sticks and branches, and then only by the end you add the big log. And it's kind of the same thing with having a conversation that is vulnerable, or even with building a relationship. You can't just jump in and try to light the log with your lighter. You kind of have to go through the different phases.
Yes, the different stages. That's funny. I actually so I just came back from a business seminar with Tony Robbins, and he had a speaker during the seminar who talked about the 12 stages of intimacy and related that to marketing and selling. He basically talked about how in a relationship, there are stages that you have to go through to build trust, right? When you first meet somebody, maybe you look at them, and then maybe you shake hands, and then maybe there's a little bit more contact, and then it kind of, builds and builds until you have a more deep and intimate relationship. But you wouldn't, as soon as you meet somebody, you wouldn't skip 5 steps and automatically kiss them or automatically put your hand on their head, because they would just freak out, because that is too much too soon. And he said that if you skip more than, I think, 2 of those steps of intimacy, people actually feel pretty put off and even assaulted, it was too aggressive. And it's it's sort of similar with these questions. If you just jump in right away to the most deep and intimate thing, even if you're comfortable sharing that, other people might be whoa, that was a little bit too much. So it's good to just sort of check in with people's comfort levels and then start off slow and then build that trust from there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds exactly what I learned with the cards, because that very first deck that I created didn't have different levels. It was just called Deep Questions, and it was a list of questions, and some of them were deeper than others. But I noticed pretty quickly that there's some questions that are really powerful, but if you ask them right at the beginning, people are not ready to actually explore the true and honest answer.
Right.
They give you like a surface level answer to the deep question, and then you move on. Whereas if you build this trust, even with a group of people or with one person that you're playing this with, by like the second or third round, you're ready to really share things that you might not have shared with anyone.
During those 8 years when you were in Canada and you hadn't really formed sort of deeper relationships or friendships yet, how do you think that affected you, like, or the quality of your life or your happiness on a day-to-day level?
The funny thing is that I didn't know that I was missing something. I think it's the going on autopilot. You just live your life and you don't really think much about it. And to me, like I mentioned before, it was after that retreat, I'm like, oh my God, this is what it could be. And the people that I met there literally lived down the street. How come I've not ever looked at finding those people before? Why did I have to wait to kind of run into them by accident? Like, I'm definitely much happier. I would say that I am more introverted. So I never really enjoyed going to big networking events or parties. But once I found my community here in Toronto, just going to the right events where I know I will connect with people like deeply, meaningfully, it'll just be easy to connect with people rather than a struggle. I think that shifted a lot for me in my life. Yeah. Like, I wasn't wasting time and energy going to events where I wouldn't enjoy myself and not even walk away with, let's say, at a networking end with like a meaningful business connection. I would just walk away with a couple of business cards. I think I'd never really prioritized social relationships as much as I do now.
And are you still able to maintain those relationships with like your busy life now and with your son?
I have a smaller group of friends that we actually started a mastermind group together. And we just yesterday spent an hour in a salt cave to meditate together and then had dinner afterwards. And we still meet or at least have a call once a week. And I feel like that's the one thing that has been the most consistent. Yeah. But even without that, I'm trying to make sure that I can still have that time for relationships. So whenever I spend time with my son, usually right now Fridays and Saturdays, I still meet up with people. I'll just bring him. So as long as he's part of hanging out in the park, when I meet somebody else, then nobody has complained about that before.
Yeah. With these cards, like, how do you suggest people use them if they're wanting to create some of those deeper friendships or have like their own gatherings?
Yeah, I think there's, before you even think of making more friends, I have this exercise that I do at least once a year that I also now do with people that work with me. It's called the Relationship Roadmap. And you basically try to put people that you spend the most time with into different categories. And you've probably heard the quote, you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're not even aware of who are we spending the time with, and maybe who are the people that we want to spend more time with, but we're not. So once you put people in different categories, you realize, oh, this person makes me feel really good, yet the last time I talked to them was half a year ago. Why is that? Right. So it helps me kind of pick the people that I want to invest more time in. And then once I know that that's the case, it's easy to invite them for an activity or a dinner party, or just reach out and see what they're up to and reconnect. The second step would be, if you feel like you don't have those people around, is how do you find new people? And I think with new people, it's a bit harder. So what I've done when I host my dinners is I usually invite people that don't know each other, because I really like that dynamic of people showing up with the intent to actually meet somebody new. Mm-hmm. And that way everybody's in the same position of like, it's not 2 best friends that know everything. So once we share stories, they make all these inside jokes and everybody else feels left out. Yeah. So like, if people don't know each other, it's a different dynamic. And then I usually invite at least 1 or 2 people that I have never met personally. and that come from like a recommendation from a friend that has maybe attended a dinner before, and I asked them, hey, who do you think would enjoy this? Can you introduce me? Or sometimes I invite people from like a local Facebook group or community that I'm part of that I have not met in person yet. And that way, by bringing all of those people together, that mix is really amazing to, make some new connections, but not feel like they're total strangers.
Right. So trying to find people that already have somewhat similar values and who also have the desire to create more connections with people. So you have that willingness there. What is a good number of people to start with?
I would say maybe 4 to 6 people is like a sweet spot in terms of having one group conversation. Just also looking again at time, if you have more people and everybody shares, it will just take more time for everybody to have like a moment to share something. So I usually like to keep it between 4 and 6. Plus, that's about the space that I have in my apartment. So it kind of works out that way.
Yeah, I like the idea of the relationship roadmap that you mentioned. A lot of times we have people in our lives that they've been in our lives for so long that it's just natural that they're there, and we don't always think about the quality of that relationship. And sometimes the quality of those relationships aren't the best. Like if you're spending a lot of time with somebody that really makes you feel down and sad or angry and negative, or somebody that you realize whenever you guys talk, it's just a bunch of gossip and things that aren't really meaningful to you, then it might be a good time to just reflect on what you're bringing into each other's lives and whether, first of all, I guess, want to keep each other in each other's lives. And if so, how can you change the dynamics so that you're actually being positive influences on each other?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happens once you realize who those people are and in which category you would put them.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's 4 categories, but the kind of 2 differences is that person contributing to your life, or is it holding you back?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, a really easy way to find out if they're one or the other is imagining that they're calling you on your cell phone. Once you see their name on the display, are you excited to pick up, or do you let it go to voicemail?
That's a good initial test. Yeah, because that's just instinctual. It's like, yes, I want to pick that up, or maybe later.
Yeah, and once you know who are the people that you're excited to talk to, once you spend more time with them, I would say that all the other relationships almost sort itself out. Like I've had people that I thought we're going to be best friends. Like we aligned on values. It was so much fun hanging out with them. But every time we wanted to hang out, it took forever to find a date. It was always me trying to initiate to get together. It was never from their side. And after a couple of months, I realized this is really draining my energy. I'm starting to get less and less excited to be hanging out with that person because it seems so much work. Once we're together, it was great, but just getting there seemed to be like draining me a lot. So for me, it was just, okay, maybe that's not the relationship I should invest in. What if I invested that same time into somebody else and see what happens then? So basically stop following up with that person, and that relationship basically just faded away. I didn't have any hard feelings, and the other person didn't have any hard feelings, and I think it was just for the best.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't want to force it if it wasn't flowing naturally.
Yeah. And I think once you find those relationships where it does, like we could all be doing so much more to build those relationships.
Mm-hmm. For your relationship roadmap, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's 4 categories. So there's the first one, which is kind of in the middle. I think of them as like these concentric circles. So the middle circle is people, it's called the love category. So people that you love and people that love you, which usually is like maybe your spouse, your partner, your parents, close family, siblings, maybe your best friend. that would be in that category. And then the next circle is the lift category. So that includes anybody that lifts you up, that contributes to your life, that makes you feel great once you are around them. You feel like if you chat with them, you actually have more energy. Mm-hmm. And then other two categories are the limit and let go categories. And that's the opposite. It's the energy vampires, the people that drain you, where you almost feel like if it's a very toxic relationship, it could be that you have like a headache, like you feel physically unwell when you spend time with them, or when you like read an email or a message from them. And why there's a difference between limit and let go is some people are in your life that are these energy vampires that kind of hold you back, but you can't really live without them. Let's say a family member that you can't really eliminate from your life completely. You can't let them go, but you can limit the time that you spend with them or the energy that you invest into that relationship. Let go is like the last category. Like there's absolutely no reason why they're still in your life. And those are the ones that you kind of let go. I do this exercise once a year, like as part of my annual review, because it like the people in our lives change all the time. So this is kind of like my spring cleaning. I also sometimes joke I'm using Marie Kondo's method of like her tidying up, looking at my friends and seeing if they still spark joy, and if they don't, thanking them and letting them go. So it's this great system to keep your awareness on the relationships that contribute the most to your life.
For people that perhaps you want to limit or let go, what do you do if you have a feeling of guilt around not wanting to spend time with somebody and wanting to cut them out of your life, but also maybe feeling like obligated to hang out with them, or feeling badly that you want to kind of cut them out of your life? How do you deal with that?
I know this is probably the trickiest situation of them all, of like, first of all, putting people in a category. Sometimes people feel like they don't want to put somebody in that category. But I see it from the viewpoint of you only have that much energy that you have to give. You only have that much time that you can spend with people. And if you spend it with the people that is kind of a reciprocal relationship that make you feel good, your life is going to improve in all kinds of different areas. If you spend more time with the people on the other side, you're probably not going to feel so great. So it's a hard step that you have to take. And sometimes that could be as small as setting up some boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to limit people completely right away. You can start setting some boundaries and see what happens. And next time you do the roadmap, you can see if something has changed. I also believe that once you know where people are at, you still can make a choice and say, well, I put this person in the limit category, but I actually care about them a lot. What could I do to bring them closer to the middle? Like, is there something in that relationship that I have not been doing that could change the dynamics of the relationship? So I think there's different ways when it gets into the like actual tangible things that you could do. My go-to has been not to focus on any of the limit and let go category people, because I love the saying, what you water grows, or like where you put your energy, that will expand. I'd much rather think about all the amazing people that I want to invest in rather than the people that I don't. And sometimes everything else will just work itself out.
Can you tell us, maybe share an experience or a story of maybe one of the groups that you've ran with the Ask Deep Questions cards?
I run a couple of different events here in Toronto. I always use my cards for, and I actually call them campfire conversations based on the original camping trip, where I host a campfire. I actually rent a campfire pit in the city in a park. And we'll get together there in the summer. And in the winter, I created this LED campfire, which is on my desk next to me, that we kind of gather around. And then we have these conversations. And I seem to always attract a lot of people that show up by themselves, have never attended one of my events, found out about it either through some like blog or from a friend, and they feel isolated, disconnected, alone, like they are looking for connection. And it's always amazing to see when somebody comes to my event kind of uncomfortable and nervous, and different to a lot of other events that I've attended. As soon as you arrive, you get a task, you get something to do to actually make it easier to talk to someone. So I created these name tags that have question prompts on them. So same as with the 3 different levels of my cards, you get to pick a name tag that has a question prompt on it that is something that you feel comfortable talking about. Sometimes it is, ask me about the best part of my day, or ask me about a recent win, or ask me about my big goal, or ask me about a challenge I'm facing right now. So you can go different levels, but just by that simple thing of people writing their name on a name tag and then just turning to somebody else, there is already a start of a conversation there. Like you don't have to do small talk, or you can basically launch right in. Then because we do different activities, again, starting from the curious level, and at the end we usually share something quite vulnerable, sometimes anonymously, to allow for people to really share like their honest truths. I've had a few people tell me that they've met friends at the event that they attended by themselves that still hang out. I've gotten pictures from people who met up in Europe on vacation, that met at my events. And like just hearing those stories is great. But what's like the best stories are somebody attending my event, buying a deck of cards, then hosting their own group of people to have conversations with the cards, and then somebody from that group goes on my website, buys a deck of cards. Like it just keeps going that way, and I'm at a point where I have no idea where people find out about it. And every once in a while I get a message of somebody that like I try to track it back. How did this happen? And once I like do this like 6 degrees of separation, that's the best part.
Why do you think they've been doing so well?
I think it's especially for our generation, based on the research that I've read, and even like in Toronto, they did a big study on social capital, where they try to find out who are the people that are the most connected or the least connected in our city. And they found out that seniors are actually the most connected out of all the age groups, but the like 21 to 25, 25 to 29-year-olds seem the least connected. I didn't really know why when I first heard those statistics, but it kind of felt true. Like I felt that, yes, millennials, people who are a little bit younger, there is something where we are surrounded by a lot of people. We use social media to collect all these Facebook friends and LinkedIn connections and followers, but we still feel disconnected. Like that's definitely how I felt before I started hosting these events and actually purposefully creating my personal community. Is you're around people all the time, but we're constantly having these surface level conversations. We're not courageous enough to be vulnerable with someone that we meet, even with people that we're pretty close with. So I think that has definitely a big impact on there being a need for a tool like this that makes it a little bit easier to create those connections and go below the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it funny? Like, when we were younger, we would always like call each other up on the phone, like when we wanted to hang out or talk. But now everything's done through like text or through Facebook. And so I feel like as we grow up this way and as the younger generations grow up this way, that we're kind of losing that art of conversation. And it's becoming like more and more uncomfortable to have conversations because we're so disconnected, which it doesn't have to be like that. And I love that you created these cards to sort of bring that back and bring more meaning into our interactions with people. Because I think we've all gone through the experience of going to a party, going out and meeting a ton of people, but everything is just so surface level. It's just a lot of small talk. And, every now and then small talk, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't really fulfill us on a deeper level. It doesn't really create these relationships that people are craving. And I think these cards are just kind of a fun, easy, beautiful way to reignite some of that connection that so many of us are looking for.
Mm-hmm. I sometimes compare it to growing up. I used to love eating cereal. Like, it was my breakfast. It's still one of the things that are really easy to make. My dad always jokes that the only thing he can cook is cereal, because normally my mom is the one who cooks. But to me, cereal is great, but it's not really sustaining food that you could eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for weeks on end. But that's how it is with small talk. Like, once you keep eating cereal every day, you kind of get used to it. You almost forget that there's other food out there. And then once you have a meaningful conversation, it's like this delicious, healthy, nutritious feast. And you suddenly realize, oh, that's what I've been craving. That's why I wasn't feeling so good. But a lot of times, similar to like that weekend retreat that I mentioned, you almost have to experience it to know what you've been missing, because it's so hard to tell.
That's so true. Maybe let's try it. Can we try it with each other? Just doing maybe a couple of the questions with each other?
Sure.
So people can see what kind of questions there are. Let's start with the easiest ones, the curious ones.
I definitely would start with the curious questions. And I will tell you this, because I by now probably have almost answered every question. I give myself the challenge of finding a new answer every time I pick the same card, just to keep it interesting even for myself. And there's something that I also always share before I use the cards with someone, especially once you go to like the lower levels, the more vulnerable cards, is you always have a choice of how deep you want to go. So usually when I tell people that they can facilitate this themselves, it's either you pick one card, one question, and everybody shares their answer to that one question, or everybody picks a different card. And that way you get to hear lots of different conversations, and it makes it a little bit more interesting sometimes based on the people. And then you decide as a group if you want to go to the next level deeper. And if you want to stay at the same level, that's fine too. Usually with the second round, whatever level you pick, the questions or the answers automatically go deeper, because people have started to build that trust. And then there's sometimes that you pick up one card and you have an hour conversation and you totally forget that you were playing a game, and that actually would probably be the best case scenario. I'll pick a random card from the curious cards.
Okay.
And the question is this: if you met your 10-year-old self today, what would they tell you?
Oh, little 10-year-old Julie. She would tell me to remember to play, and she would tell me not to forget to do the things that really make me feel joyful and playful and happy.
Mm-hmm. What is one of those things?
It's actually stuff like this, just talking to people. The whole reason behind, I'm getting teary already, look at this. The whole reason behind creating this podcast is because I'm just a very naturally curious person. Like, I love learning, and I love reading books and learning about new topics. And I thought this would just be a really cool way to keep learning and connecting with awesome people that are really passionate about what they're doing in their lives, and then sharing that passion with whoever wants to listen and learn. And I think that the listeners are going to gain so much from just hearing people talk about things that they're really excited and passionate about, and the good works that they're up to. And so that's really how this podcast came about, because I was wanting to fulfill that desire to have connections with people and to learn and to share that. And also to do it in a way that's not too like serious, you know? I think sometimes we get so serious, or we can get so focused on like doing things perfectly and wanting things to be like really successful or to be a certain way. And sometimes we just need to try things out and experiment and know that it's not going to be perfect and that we're going to learn a lot along the way. And even I've only done maybe 5 or 6 interviews so far, but every time I do one, like I learn a little bit more. And it's really important to just keep that mindset. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do something that makes you happy, and it'll take you on this journey of growth and learning and connection. And yeah, so.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks.
Almost makes me think of like, what would 10-year-old Julie, what kind of podcast would she do? And would that look like the one that you're doing now?
You know, I think she would do something similar, but just about more like playful topics, like just sort of random, fun, funny, playful topics. I think she would just do it with a little bit more freedom and less seriousness. And I actually, I'm glad that you asked me that, because I don't want this to be too serious. I want it to be really fun and playful and just a really great learning experience for everybody. So I'm trying to bring more of that playfulness into this, and also just into my daily life. Like when I interviewed Jeff Harry a few weeks ago, you know, his whole company is about bringing more play into our work and into our daily lives, and just enjoying life more and connecting with what makes us happy and connecting with that inner child. And I think we could all use a little bit more of that.
Definitely. This was great.
Okay, let's do one for you.
All right. Should you choose same question, different question?
Let's do a different one, just so we can hear some more of the questions that are on the cards.
Sure. Do you want to pick one?
Yeah. Let's do the one on this farthest side to your right.
This side.
Yeah.
All right. What is a piece of advice you have received that you were glad to take? Another thing that I share with people, especially when it comes to more meaningful questions, is that sometimes you don't have an answer right away. And for me, I needed to take a moment to see what is the answer that I want to share. But oftentimes there is one memory that kind of pops up out of nowhere. And there's a reason, I believe, why it shows up. And sometimes we go in our head of like, oh, this is the answer. No, that's not a good answer. Or this is the answer. No, that's not a good answer. I always challenge myself to just share whatever is the first thing that comes up. And once I start talking, it starts to make a lot more sense why that came up. So I'm going to share something and I have no idea where it's going to lead.
Okay, cool. I love it.
But the advice, which I'm not sure what the actual words of that advice were, was from my dad. And my dad, I think he's a person that is very likable because he really, how do I describe this? So he used to be like in the technical management of this big city-run property that has all these startups inside. So it's like a huge startup incubator. And whenever they needed something done, they would go to my dad. And me just growing up, seeing how many bottles of wine he would get as gifts because he did his job always amazed me. And I never really understood like why if you ask somebody to do their job, why would you give them a gift as a thank you? And I think my dad just always went above and beyond, and probably knew that there is more to just doing the task, but it's about building that relationship with that person. Because there were many times where we used those relationships to our advantage. When I got married with my wife, we actually got married in Germany, and we ended up getting our wedding location for free because of a relationship that my dad had built with the person who owned it. And it's interesting for me to reflect on this as I'm now all about how do you build these relationships. And there's so many things that I can learn from my dad that he might not have said as words of like, here's the advice that I should follow, but he just, the actions that he took was the advice or the lessons that I'm taking away from him.
Yeah, he just kind of modeled it for you, but didn't necessarily tell you.
Yeah, which is kind of really interesting, realizing this now as being a new dad and thinking about how can I teach my son important values and things like this. Noticing that it's not about actually telling him the lessons, but leading by example.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I had no idea where it's going to go, but now I'm like, I get it. I now know why this came up, because I'm now the dad. Yeah, I oftentimes, I don't know if you ever pick like tarot cards or oracle cards or anything like that.
Yeah.
The people who believe in that type of thing, I totally believe that the question sometimes chooses you rather than you choosing the question. And there's many times where I kept getting the same question over and over. And there was a reason for that in that time. So it was interesting. Actually, it was just a couple of weeks ago when I was with Jeff Harry at that World Domination Summit at that conference, and I kept getting the same vulnerable question. It was to the point where I said, I don't want to play this. I don't want to pick another card. I don't want to go vulnerable anymore because I'm afraid I will get that same question again.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
If we pick it, then we can chat about it. I'll let the cards decide.
Okay. Okay.
Should we pick a brave card?
Oh, yes. That's the middle one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do brave.
And how about we'll both answer the same question?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, but you get to point right or left.
You're right.
My right. Well, that's interesting. What do you value most in a friendship?
Oh. I think it's reliability. Just knowing that, and reliability on different levels. So knowing that somebody is going to be there for me when I need to talk to them. Knowing that they'll follow through if we have plans. Knowing that I can rely on them. That really, for me, helps to build trust. And I think trust is just so imperative for any relationship. And I've noticed that with my friends, if I feel like I can't rely on them, like if they have flaked out on me multiple times, especially if it's been about something really important, I actually just let those relationships sort of just fade away. I don't like cut them off, but they just sort of naturally fade away. And so just having somebody that I can count on. Yeah, it sounds so simple, but that is really important for me. And of course, somebody that I have fun with, somebody, we have fun together, we have similar values, we help each other during difficult times, we give each other advice. All of that is so important. But I think that reliability is
one of the most important things that I look for in a relationship, in a friendship.
Yeah, probably in any relationship. Like I've realized a lot of times when you talk about like friendship values, other relationship values, or even like business relationship values are very similar. Actually, if you don't mind me asking you a follow-up question, which also is something that I didn't share in this case, but I usually invite people to ask follow-up questions.
Okay.
Because once you get to stories and having people share stories with each other, that's where things get really interesting. Because a lot of those questions you could just say, oh, reliability, next. Right? You could answer this question in one word, but it wouldn't really help us getting to know each other. So I love asking follow-up questions that kind of get at sharing some more stories. I'm wondering if there's a moment where you realize that that is something that is really important to you, like reliability in a friendship.
Yeah, it's with a friend that I've known for a while. And she's a beautiful person, and I love her. I haven't seen her in a while. And there were times over maybe the last 5 years or so that I felt that she kind of flaked out on me. And I tried not to make a big deal out of them. But then there was a particular time where I think it was my birthday, and she didn't come again, even though she said she would, because she said she was working, or she chose to work basically. And I was upset about it and sad about it. And then I just realized that I didn't want to keep putting my energy into a relationship that didn't feel like reliable, that with someone that I didn't feel like I could really count on and trust. And so our relationship has sort of faded, and it's okay. Like I actually don't have like angry feelings towards her now. I think that she's kind of going through her own journey and her own things that you know, make her prioritize things in a certain way. And it's okay, and I'm okay with that. And we don't have to be best friends, and we don't have to be, you know, huge parts of each other's lives, at least not right now, because it just wasn't feeling like it was a reciprocal and healthy relationship anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that might resonate with almost everyone, like having had that one friend that keeps flaking out. Like it's similar to the story that I shared earlier. Like it reminds me of exactly the same situation.
What about you?
Friendship values, I would call it authenticity or being yourself or no bullshit. I've noticed actually recently in the last year probably that one friend that we used to be pretty close. At one point, I don't know, something happened. We started kind of drifting apart, going different ways in our lives. And whenever I asked her what's a deep, meaningful question, I would get a bullshit surface level answer. And I would keep trying to, I guess, have her open up and like share a little bit more of also the things that are challenging. But for whatever reason, she chose not to. And I realized that like she's basically wearing this mask in our relationship, in our friendship the whole time. And I just couldn't connect with her. Like it was probably also my journey of getting to a point, maybe this was always like that. And I just now slowly have become aware of it, of, again, other friendships could be, of me being more vulnerable with the things that I share with people that I meet, with things that I share online. Just understanding that not everybody's life is perfect, and it doesn't have to be. And sometimes sharing when it isn't is the most important thing to feel connection to somebody else. And I felt she just wasn't ready for that at that time.
It just sort of faded after that.
Yeah, like we still are in touch every once in a while, but it's I wouldn't say that we're close anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel?
In a way, I at one point I felt like I wanted, like thinking again of seeing where she is on my relationship roadmap on the circle of being at the edge of falling into the limit category. I was trying to figure out, well, do I actually want to do something to invest in that relationship? And that every time we hung out or I saw a message or an email, I would just, like, it would not be a good feeling. So at one point, I've realized I think it's time to move on. And I also understand that, what's that saying? People come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I think there was a reason why she came in my life. And we had great experiences and we learned a lot of lessons from each other. We helped each other grow. But I think it was time to move on for both of us, to explore different things. Once I realized that, I think I was fine. It's now no hard feelings. This is just like the time of the relationship. The reason why we came into each other's life has been fulfilled. Now it's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to be able to come to those terms, because that way you're not trying to hold on to or force something that just isn't naturally there anymore. Sometimes it's worth like fighting for something and really working hard to make a relationship better. And sometimes we just have to know that it's time to let go, and that's okay too. And I think knowing the difference between those two is probably the challenging part.
Yeah. And I would say I made an invitation to work on this. And like with what I said earlier of me realizing that, like, for any relationship to work, you have to be vulnerable with each other. Like, you have to be able to build this trust. And if you can't do that, then it can be one person sharing and the other person's not.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the point where I realized, okay, this is not going to work out unless she would take that offer.
Yeah. This is really cool. I actually feel like it's just nice to just talk to someone and just be like what we're doing right now. It just feels like I already feel like I know you a little bit more.
I think in the last year, I've come to understand why that feels so needed, or why it feels so good to have conversations like this, is because the way the game works, or the way the rules, the way I explain it, of one person is sharing, the other person's listening, and your goal is not to also share your answer, but maybe come up with follow-up questions and ask for stories. It's, when was the last time somebody actually listened to you, rather than them thinking of a story that they could share on your question? When we have conversations with each other, I oftentimes call it giving the gift of presence, which to me is turning off your smartphone and putting it away for the duration of, let's say, the dinner or the event or the interaction. And then really being present with the other person and not thinking of what's the next thing I can say, but what's something that I'm genuinely curious about? What's something else I could ask that helps the other person share their story so I understand them better? Definitely something that is kind of like going to the gym. Like, you need to practice this. It's like those types of listening skills is something that I always challenge people to kind of practice at an event or while using the cards, but you don't necessarily pick it up right away.
It takes a little practice. So just the next time you're having a conversation, I mean, and we could all try doing this today, is when somebody's telling you a story, just really putting away distractions, being there, and just listening, and not just thinking about, okay, how am I going to respond to this, or what can I say next?
Yeah. They call it active listening for a reason. It's not like a passive thing. You're not just there to take things in, but you're also responding with your body language, with the follow-up questions. Most people don't have that chance very often to feel heard, to feel seen. And that's maybe one of the most fundamental needs that we as humans have. The challenging thing will always to get people to buy into the idea of having a meaningful conversation. I never force anybody to participate because you can't make somebody be vulnerable. That never works. So yeah, usually the way I explain it is when I host a dinner, let's say with the cards, I say this is a dinner where we'll have meaningful conversations that are different to your everyday to day conversations. And it is a tag-free event. So leave your phone in your bag just to set expectations. There are some people that will say, oh my God, that sounds so boring. I am never going to come. And that's totally fine. Those are the people that probably wouldn't enjoy the event and you wouldn't enjoy having a conversation with. But on the other hand, there's some people that get super excited by that idea and they'll be like RSVPing the minute after you invite them. And those are the people that I usually want to surround myself with for this. And I know that there is a benefit of having like a diverse group of voices on the table, but I also believe that some people just might not be ready for it. So I always make it an invitation for people to participate. And if they take me up on it, then we'll have an amazing time.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to do this, right, they would have the cards and then maybe set some ground rules like you said. So turn off your phones, make sure that you're coming to this with a willingness to be open and to share. What are some of the other things that you would tell people before?
Yeah, so one thing, especially when it comes to the more vulnerable questions, is I always give people the choice. So let's say you pick a card, you read it by yourself first. Unless we're all answering the same question, everybody picks their own question. It's never me reading a question, asking it to someone else.
Okay.
Like you pick your own card. You're in control. You read the question by yourself first, and you have an option to exchange it for a different card. But I also give people the invitation to read the question. If it makes you uncomfortable, just take one breath and see if there's something you want to share why this card makes you uncomfortable. And it's not about answering the question, but just sharing something about yourself. And if you feel that's just stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit, then maybe that's the right thing to do. But I never want to have anyone feel like they're being forced or pressured to answer a question that they don't want to talk about. Because there's definitely some questions that could trigger memories, traumatic experiences for certain people. And you need to feel like the people that you're with are people that you can trust with whatever you share. I sometimes also say that like this, everything that's shared is confidential, like it doesn't leave the room. You need to make sure that the people that are attending feel like they can actually share. And I sometimes have people that say, oh, I just want to watch. And the interesting thing is, especially, like I usually don't let people watch if we already have gone a few rounds and they join late. But if they just watch for the first round of going curious and everybody share their answer before we move on to the next level, that's when I invite them. Maybe just read, pick 3 cards, read all the questions, and then see if there's one that you want to maybe answer. And not a single person has stayed out of the game after they hear everybody sharing, and then get the choice to like actually read a few questions. Because again, everybody is kind of moving at their own speed. And if picking a blind question is giving you a lot of anxiety, then read a couple of questions and then pick the one that you feel the most comfortable with.
Another tool that I'd like to leave the listeners with, if they wanted to try doing this on their own, was the relationship roadmap, because I think that's super helpful. So can you just tell people how they would do that if they wanted to sort of categorize and prioritize their relationship?
Yeah, actually I have that as a download on my website, the workbook, and it has like the different circles and some instructions on how to fill it out. I created this whole like 30 questions to help you figure out who are those people that are in your life that you might want to add to that roadmap or not add or like eliminate from your roadmap.
So tell us how people can find you if they want to learn more, if they want to get the cards, and maybe any events or workshops that you have coming up.
Yeah. So if you go to askdeepquestions.com, you can look up everything about the cards. And I also have this deep conversations guide that I'm giving away, which is, I think, at the bottom of every page on my website, you can find that. That has a couple of tips if you're like attending a networking event or going to a party and you just want to learn some tools on how you can get beyond small talk. So if you want to have these conversations, but you don't have the cards on you, or it's just like too deep for, let's say, a first conversation with somebody that you have just met, that has a bunch of different strategies and tips and even like conversation starters that you can use just in your everyday, day-to-day life. I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance to share my message, but also being vulnerable with me on this podcast, because it's one thing to like using the cards and having a conversation with somebody one-on-one or in a small group, but doing it online and sharing it as a podcast is another step of being vulnerable. So thank you for doing that. And I felt I really got to know you a bit in this last hour and a half.
Yeah, I did too. And I actually kind of felt that shift a little bit. I'm super excited about these cards. I can't wait to get a set for myself. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you very much too.
Boop, 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 boop. If you can't wait to get your own set of Ask Deep Questions cards and maybe even host your own gathering, I've got great news for you. Jan is offering $5 off the deck of cards when you simply use the code Rainbows Are Circles, all lowercase. An additional tool that Jan offers to help you create meaningful connections is his Find Your People online course. He's offering $50 off to Rainbows Are Circles listeners. Simply use the code Rainbows Are Circles 2, that's TOO. Visit his website, jankeck.com, to find out more. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast so you can get these episodes downloaded as soon as they're available, please hit the subscribe button. You can also leave a rating and review for the podcast, which helps to grow the show and reach even more listeners. An additional way you can support Rainbows Are Circles is by donating $1 a month to the podcast. Every single dollar counts and ensures that Rainbows Are Circles stays alive and kicking. Just visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/rainbowsarecircles. As a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content at least once a month. For this month, I'll be creating a guided relaxation audio recording to help you unwind at the end of a long day and promote restful sleep. I truly appreciate all of your support, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Until then, have a magical day. Bam, ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, bam. Bam, ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, bam. Wow, 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 wow. Rainbows are circles, yeah.